Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's session on free OpManager training series. Before we start, I would like to get a quick confirmation from you all. If you can hear me well and see the presentation, please use the webinar chat panel and type yes. Let me wait for a couple of confirmation and then we can get started. Yes, I can see a lot of confirmation from you all, so we are good to go. All right, let me introduce myself. My name is Suresh Bhagavati, Evangelist for Manage Engine IT Operations Suite. I'm with Manage Engine for the past 10 years. Before I ended up in this role, I was working as a support engineer with OpManager technical team and helped customers and prospects around the globe to make best use of OpManager in their organization. So with all these experience, I'm here doing a 5-part free OpManager training series. As you all know, we have already covered the discovery and classification section. That is our first session where you learned the different ways of getting your inventories inside OpManager. And in the second session, you learned about monitoring the performance on the servers, including virtual infrastructure. And in the previous session, we learned about monitoring the performance on the network devices like routers, switches, the interface traffic utilization, and the IPSLA monitoring. And also, we learned about troubleshooting. What should I do? How to troubleshoot when an SNMP monitor is not collecting data. And in our today's topic, we will discuss about the effective fault management and IT automation. Following this, next week, we have network maps, network management, network reports, and best practices. That will be our last presentation, last part in our training series. And more importantly, the recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to all the participants, and you can very well share this with your friends or colleagues who missed to join today's session. Also, the recorded version will be updated in our training page. You can see the URL displayed on your screen. You can access this page. The today's recording will be updated by tomorrow, so you can have a look whenever you find time. So let's get started with our week 4 topic, effective fault management and IT automation. So when it comes to fault management, there are 3 things that you need to focus on. How to identify the faults quickly. So OpManager lets you monitor the device up-down status, interface up-down status, process down, services down, and the performance metrics like CPU, memory, disk, interface traffic utilization, and so on. And also, it includes monitoring the event logs, syslogs, SNMP traps. So you can receive you can identify the faults from your network quickly, and how to prioritize these problems. So based on the severity, OpManager categorize each of these problems, whether it is critical or service down or trouble or attention. So you know how many critical problems you have, and you can give priority to the critical problem and get that fixed. And the ultimate goal of any administrator is to reduce the number of problems occurring in the network. So you can see a happy face on this administrator because all the services are currently up and running, and he had reduced the number of problems occurred in his network. So let's see what we got here to discuss about the effective fault management and IT automation today. So we're going to learn about the alarm severity levels available in OpManager and threshold violation alarm, how to configure thresholds on a performance metrics, and other alarms like VMware events, event logs, SNMP traps, and syslogs. And how do we notify the triggered alarm in OpManager to an email or SMS? And how do we use IT workflow automation to remediate problems? And finally, I'll be sharing some of the tips and tricks related to the fault management and questions. At any point of time, you have any questions during the presentation, I encourage you to post that using the webinar chat panel. And we have a panelist team who can answer all your questions right there. And also, we'll pick some of the interesting questions and discuss about all those questions at the end of the session. All right, so let's get started with alarm severity levels. So these are all the different types of alarm severities available in OpManager. Attention being the lowest category alarm, and trouble with medium, critical the highest severity alarm. And for service down, you have a separate category. And clear at any point of time, an alarm is clear. And there are two kinds in the severity. One is predefined. So for example, the device down that triggers an alarm for device down that misses one pole, and the device for missing 3 poles, it triggers a trouble alarm, and for missing 5 poles, it triggers a critical alarm. And for interface down, it has a trouble alarm. So the point I'm trying to make here is, for all these down alerts, you cannot change the severity. All these are predefined, and you don't have an option to change the severity for the down alarms, like device down, service down, process down, and so on. And there are some alerts for which you can categorize, you can change the severity levels. For example, in event log, you're receiving an event from one of the Windows server, and that might be an information, but for you it is very critical. So you want that information to be seen as a critical alarm in OpManager. You can configure for the event logs, and that is also applicable for SNMP traps and as well as Syslogs. All right. So when it comes to threshold-based alarms, as you all know, thresholds are configured for proactive network monitoring, and you can configure thresholds on performance metrics like CPU, memory, disk, interface utilization, and so on. You can configure thresholds at multiple levels so that you can get notified about the problems at various stages. So I'm here, I'll take you through the product and show you how you can configure a thresholds on an individual device, and how you can set a consecutive times, and how you can set a rearm value to clear the fault alarms. Let me jump into the product. So let me go inside the inventory page and pick the test server, for example. And if I get inside the monitoring section, this is where it lists all the performance metrics being monitored from this device. So I can just click on edit, and I can configure thresholds, and I can set condition whether it is greater than 50%. So I can set multi-level threshold. For trouble, I can set 60, and for critical can be 80, and for rearm, if I use this 50. So why do you need to configure a rearm alarm? So say for example, you want, whenever the CPU utilization goes back to 50% or below than 50%, then you want the alarm to be cleared automatically. So you can use rearm alarm for that. And consecutive times, say for example, I don't want to receive an alert for a random CPU spike. Maybe a backup job was happening at that time and CPU spiked more than 80%, but I don't want the alarm to be triggered at the very first time. So I can set the consecutive time as 3. So which means that, so it will wait for 15 minutes. So it will wait for 3 polls, and if the alarm is still, if the CPU is still more than 80%, only then it will trigger an alarm. So I can avoid an alarm being generated for unnecessary spike on the server. So this is how you configure a threshold on an individual device. So let me just jump back to the presentation slide. Yes. So now we saw how you can set thresholds on an individual device. So is there a way that you can apply this globally? Yes, you can do that. If you go to settings, configuration, and device template. So let me pick Windows 10 for example. So here is where you can just edit threshold. You can configure a threshold value. Say for example, I wanted to configure a threshold value for used disk space. Just giving 10, and for the rearm I'm configuring it as 5, and I'm clicking on OK. So whatever the thresholds that I wanted to update, so I can do this for used disk space in MB, and also so the monitors listed for used disk space in GB, free disk space in GB, and whatever the number of monitors that you want to configure a threshold for, you can configure it here, and you can click on save and associate. This takes you to another page where it displays all the available devices. So if you want this configuration to be happened on a group of devices based on the device type Windows 10. So you can do this from here, move it to the right hand side, and if you click on associate, so this gets applied in one click. So it gets applied to all the devices that we had selected now. So this is how you configure thresholds for a group of devices. And let's talk about the VMware alarms, event logs, SNMP traps, and Syslogs. So VMware events. So VMware events, it triggers an alarm for the inventory changes like vMotion. Whenever a vMotion happen, the guest VM will move from one host to another. So if that need to be notified, you can also configure the VMware events for those things. And not only this, if you go to settings and monitoring, under the VMware section, VMware events, you have a lot of VMware events listed. So we have listed some 23 alarms. So we consider all these are primary, and these need to be associated to ESX host or a vCenter server. But there are certain events that you don't see in the list available. So you want to add more events? Yes, you can do that. You can click on add here, and you can select the vCenter server or the ESX host, and you will see number of alarms. So more than 400 events available here, and you wanted to add more. So say for example, customization failed or VM secondary disabled. So I can select this and click on add. So this gets added to the list, and if you want this to be associated to the respective vCenter server or the ESX host, you can select those events and click on associate here and get that associated to the vCenter server or the ESX host. So this is how you bulkily configure the VMware events for the respective device. This is what we saw, how to query the events from vCenter server or ESX host. And let me take you to the next section, event log alarms. So to configure the event log monitoring on a Windows server, the prerequisites are you have to make sure that the WMI is configured on the server and the proper credentials are provided on the devices, and the RPC services are enabled on the Windows server, and the default WMI ports like 135, 445, and a port between 5000 to 6000 are allowed on your firewall, so that you don't have any problems fetching the event logs from the Windows server. All right, so let's see how do we configure event logs for a Windows server. So when you add a Windows server, it doesn't mean that it will start monitoring the event logs on the devices automatically. So if you go to settings and monitoring, here you see the event log rules. This lists all the events from application, system, or security. And you want to add more events, you can query that from the respective device and add it. And let me go to a device and show you how you can associate the event logs to the respective device. Let me pick the test server as example. And if you click on monitor section, and here you have the event log monitors. So we don't have any event log monitors added to this server. So if I click on associate monitor, and I wanted to add any security failure, so I can select this. So first I need to enable the monitoring, and if I select, so this gets associated to the device, and from now on it will start monitoring all the events related to security, and when any security event is detected, it is going to give me a trigger an alarm for the respective device. And let's talk about ignoring a specific event and why it is a very useful feature. Say for example, we are monitoring the security events from the server, and say it gives thousands of alarms for you. And if you go to event viewer under the security section, you can see a lot of audit success alarm. Say I don't want the audit success alarm to be notified, though I want to monitor all the security events. So what I can do is I can create an event for this from the event log section with this event ID. Copy this, I go to the product and settings, monitoring, event log rules. So I can add a new event under the security section. I can call this as audit success for the event ID. And I can copy the source, paste it here. And I have to select this as ignore event. If I save this and go to the respective device and get this associated from the monitoring section, associate event log monitor, so audit success. So that is all I need to do. So now on this Windows server, all the security events will be monitored, but OpManager will drop all the audit success events. So no alarms are triggered for audit success events for this particular server. All right, and here is an interesting case. Say when you monitor a Windows event log from server, and at some point of time you would have experienced that it generates thousands of event log alarm from one particular ID. So it means that there is something wrong on the server, and it generates thousands of events within a short span. So here in OpManager, we have a small option to control that. So you can freeze the event log monitoring for that particular event ID. So whenever in a situation like this, OpManager will trigger an event saying that event log is flooded for this particular event ID, which means that it will stop polling the event of that particular ID for the next 1 hour. So the configurations that you need to do on the device is you have to go to the installation folder and under OpManager, conf, and again OpManager. And if you open this server parameters.conf, and at the bottom of the file, you just need to put an entry. I've copied here. Just a moment. So this is the entry that was shown on the slide. So I just need to copy this and save this file and restart OpManager. And then whenever OpManager encounters in a situation like where it monitors, it starts receiving the event logs from one particular ID within a short span of time, it receives thousands of alarms, then it will freeze that for that particular event ID. So you can go ahead and control that. You can check why the particular event ID is generating a lot of events, and you can stop that. And then you can start monitoring that from OpManager. All right, so let's go to the next section, SNMP traps. So SNMP traps, how it works, you have to configure on the network devices to forward all the SNMP traps to OpManager server. And when you do this, it will just send a trap notification, just send a trap to OpManager server. So how OpManager converts that as a meaningful alarm? So all the information about the SNMP trap OIDs are stored in the MIB files. So that contains the collection of OIDs for the trap, and it has the relevant information. So it converts that as a meaningful alarm and show that associated to the respective device. Whenever OpManager detects a problem on the router, it sends a traffic to the OpManager server, and OpManager will trigger an alarm on the respective device. So when it comes to SNMP traps, there are 5 things that you should know about SNMP traps in OpManager. 1, you need to know what are unsolicited traps and what are warbinds. I'm going to explain all these things with use cases. What are failure components, and how do you load the traps from MIB files, and which are easy, and forwarding traps to another NMS tool. So this is what we are going to see. First, let's talk about unsolicited traps. So here is a use case. I have configured a router to forward SNMP traps to OpManager server. However, I don't get to see an alarm in OpManager. How do I fix this? And let's see the possible reasons and what are the things that you need to verify in OpManager. First of all, you need to check whether the respective device is added to OpManager. So you can check that from the inventory section. So this is where it lists all the devices, and using the category, you can just check, drill down to router section and see whether the respective router is added or not. Because if the router is not added, though the router sends a trap to OpManager server, it cannot generate an alarm for you because it doesn't have a source added to OpManager. And next, you have to check whether a trap rule is created for the respective event. So if you go to settings and monitoring, under the SNMP trap processes, there are a lot of rules predefined. You can also add your own rule, but you have to make sure that whether the respective event that's been generated, the trap being received from the router, you have the trap rule or not. You have to check this here, and also you have to make sure if it is available, you have to make sure it is enabled. So let's assume that the respective trap event is not available, trap rule, and then what you need to do, you need to check whether if it is listed under the unsolicited traps. So where you can check the unsolicited traps, if you go to alarms, events, and if you drill down this to unsolicited traps, so this lists all the traps. So what is unsolicited traps? It receives the SNMP trap from a router, but the trap rule is not defined in OpManager. So these are the traps that will be available stored under the unsolicited traps, for which the trap rule is not defined in OpManager. So, and what is the solution for this? You have to identify the event from the unsolicited traps and add a new trap rule. So it will list a lot of events if you're trying to receive SNMP trap from multiple devices and for which the SNMP trap processor rule are not available. Then you have to identify the respective trap processor from the unsolicited traps, and it is very simple to create a trap rule from the unsolicited traps. You just need to name it. Let me call this H and just save it. And it is that simple to create a trap processor rule in OpManager from the unsolicited traps section. Okay, let's move on to our next use case, warbinds. I have a Windows server added to OpManager. It triggers hundreds of trap events with various messages from XOID. However, I want to filter the trap event only if the priority is critical and clear the event automatically when the priority is low. How do I achieve this? So let me show an example of warbinds. See, this is a trap message from the Windows server. So when it comes to warbinds, you need to know what are warbinds and how to identify the warbinds from the trap event. Because in our use case, OpManager receives the trap event from a Windows server, and that sends a lot of various messages from one particular event ID. So see this example. So this is a trap message that we received, and this is how you need to identify the warbind. So it starts with variable bindings, and if you see this until this is warbind 1, and this is a attribute that is highlighted in blue color, and this is the value that is highlighted in yellow color. And the next one is SNMP trap OID, and this is the value. And similarly for HR system processor is the attribute, and it responds is the value. So how you can identify the warbind is it starts with 0 and colon. So that will be the attribute, and the next will be the value of the respective event. So in our use case, he wants to filter only the critical messages. So this comes in the 6th warbind. Let me show you clearly. So I've splitted all these things warbind. So this is being the first warbind, this is the second one, and the if number being the 4th one, and this is our case where we need to filter this. So our sixth variable that returns the priority as critical. So which is what the user want to achieve this, to filter only the critical alarms, because it generates a lot of trap events, but I want to filter and see the alarms only for the critical, the messages that has critical. And it also sends a message with a priority major. It also sends a SNMP trap with priority medium and with low. So I want to clear when I receive a message with priority low. So how I can achieve this? And both these are returning the values in varbind 6. So let me jump back to the product and show how you can do this here. Okay, let me go to the trap section, monitoring, and the SNMP trap processor. Let me edit this, and here is where you will use the match criteria. And in our case, I wanted to filter only the alarms that has the priority as critical. So I'm matching this with sixth varbind, and I wanted to clear this alarm automatically when the varbind equals the value low. So this is all you need to do. You need to match the respective varbind using the match criteria. Once you save this, and whenever OpManager receives the critical priority trap from the Windows server, it will generate an alarm. Whenever it receives a priority low, it will clear the alarm. So this is what we saw. You need to use the match criteria to filter and clear the trap alarms based on varbinds. So let's see what we got here with failure components. I have a switch added to OpManager. It triggers a failure trap event for BGP down from OID, and a clear event from BGP up from this OID. So this generates two different alarms in OpManager. I want to clear alarm for BGP up event and merge this with the original alarm because it is from the same link. So how do I achieve this? Why it generates a two different alarm? Because it has a two different OID and it has a two different trap rule created in OpManager. So that's why for a problem event you receive a separate alarm, separate trap alarm, and for a clear event it generates a separate clear event trap. So how do you get this merged? And the solution is you need to provide a common failure component in both trap rules. So let me go back to product, and if you see, this is the BGP4 backward transition, this is the problem event. So let me go and so this is the down BGP down trap alarm. It receives from this OID and sets the severity as critical. So what do I need to do? So let me call this as BGP down underscore app. So this failure component can be any string. It doesn't mean that you need to match some string here, but you can use any variable here, but you need to make sure that it is common with the clear event. So we have another trap OID for BGP up. So whenever a BGP link is established, it will generate a clear alarm. So what do I need to do? I need to provide the same failure component here. I need to set the severity as clear and save this. So now I have linked these two trap processor rule with a failure component. So one with critical and another one with clear. So whenever a BGP down trap is received by OpManager, it will trigger a critical alarm, and whenever it receives a BGP established trap, then it will clear the alarm automatically for you. So this is how you configure the failure component to link two different OIDs and merge the alarms. Let's talk about Syslog alarms. So like SNMP traps, you can also monitor, you can also receive syslogs from the end devices, and you need to ensure that the end devices are configured and forwarding the syslogs to OpManager, and it receives the syslogs from 514 and 519 UDP port. And you can also change this or add more ports to receive the, say for example you want to add more port, so click on SNMP Syslog port, and with a comma separated value you can add more ports. And you wanted to know the Syslog flow rate, the number of packets received per second, you can identify that from here. And you want to forward the Syslogs to another NMS tool, you can add it from here. You can provide the destination, add the relevant port, and click OK. So this is how you forward the Syslogs to another NMS tool. Let me go to monitoring section and click on Syslog rules. So these are all the predefined Syslog rules that are available in OpManager. So on matching all these predefined rules, OpManager will trigger a meaningful alarm on the respective devices. Say you wanted to add a new trap rule, and when you click on add, you can create a new trap rule. But you don't know what are the facility I need to select. I don't know what is the severity I need to select. So you have a confusion. How do I create a syslog rule? And there is an option to do that. You go to settings, monitoring, tools, and syslog viewer. And if you click on start, that will start receiving the syslogs that's being forwarded to OpManager server. And from here, you can identify what is the source, what is the facility, what is the severity, message, and so on. So you can identify those things and add the rule here by providing the respective information, so that the next time when it matches the respective rule, it will trigger a meaningful alarm for you. So this is what we saw right now, and let's move on to the next section, notifications. So let me briefly talk about the notification cycle. So in the first stage, you have to select what type of notification profile you want to create, whether it is an email or SMS profile, or a run a program or log a ticket or web alarm profile. You have to select the respective type in the very first stage. And the next stage is the very important stage where you will select the alarm criteria. So for whatever the alarms that you want to see that as a notification, an email or SMS, you can select the respective alarm criteria here, whether it is device down, service down, or a hardware fault, and so on. And third stage where you have to associate this with the respective devices, on what type of device you want to receive the notification for the alarms generated in OpManager. So you can categorize that based on category or business view, or based on selecting the devices manually. And fourth stage where you will schedule the devices to all the time or a preferred time. You can set delay trigger or recurring trigger. And fifth stage is where you verify all these things and add a profile with a name. Okay, here is a case. I want to receive an email notification for all service down alarms. How do I configure this in OpManager? So the very first step you need to do when you want to configure an email notification is to configure the mail server settings. You go to settings, from basic settings, you have mail server settings. You can provide the server name, the port number, the timeout, and provide the from email ID and to email ID. Provide the authentication if it is necessary. And you also have a secondary mail server. So whenever the primary server goes down, you want to receive email notification from the secondary server. You can also configure that. So this is very mandatory. So only then it will allow you to create a notification profile for the email. So I wanted to achieve creating a service down notification profile. So the very first option is email. So I'm selecting and providing the email address. And here you want to add more variables to be displayed on the subject. It is configurable. You want to see the ID of the alarm, You select and it gets appended on the message. And also on the message of the email, you want to add more variables, severity of the alarm or so on. You can add it. And in the next section is what the important section, where you will select the respective alarm criteria. In my case, I want to receive a notification for all service down alarms. And you can also define the notification based on severity. I want to receive only notification for critical alarms and not for the trouble alarm or notification. In my case, I want to receive notification only for service down. So I'm selecting the notification for service down. And if I go to next, I can select this for server. And next, I can apply this all the time. If you want to set a delay trigger, you can do this so that whenever an alarm occurs, it sends an email notification only after 5 minutes. And you can also do this for recurring trigger. And finally, just need to name this with a meaningful name. So let me call this as email_server and just save it. So this is all you need to do when you want to create an email notification profile. So here is another case. I want OpManager to create a ticket and service desk plus when a problem is detected in the interface. The ticket should have the fields like category, group, and technician filled automatically. So how do I achieve this? So the very first step is to set up the integration with Service Desk Plus. For this, go to settings, and under the basic settings, you have add-on product integration. So here you need to provide the Service Desk Plus server IP address of the name and the port number and select the relevant protocol. And you need to provide the username and the technician key. So here is where the users have a lot of questions. Where do I get the technician key? If you go to Service Desk Plus and on the logout icon, you have an option to generate an API key for the respective user. You click on it, so you can set an expiry date for the API key as well. So in my case, I'm selecting never expires and regenerate the API key. I just need to copy this and put it here and save it. So that is all you need to do to set up the integration. So now the first part is done, and the next step is to create a notification profile for a logger ticket. And you need to achieve this because you wanted to autofill the category, group, and technician. Let me show how you can do this. So if you go to notifications, you can add a notification and you can select a logger ticket profile. Okay, I think I have a problem with the API key. Let me generate this once. Copy this and put it here. Save this. Okay. Now the integration is successful. Go to tech notification again and add a profile. So here it lets me choose the category. So I can select this as network. Let me choose group and the technician as ether recam. So it also lets you choose item, subcategory, priority. So based on your need, you can select that. And if you go to next, and it's pretty much same. I'm selecting interface or switch port problem, and I'm selecting this for switch category. And I can apply this all the time. I can call this as logger ticket for switch. And I can save this. All right, I got a problem with that, but this is how you have to create a notification profile for a logger ticket. And once this is done, so this is how a ticket will be generated in Service Desk Plus. So I've already triggered a ticket for interface problem for an example. So if you scroll down, you can see that the group is assigned automatically, the technician is selected automatically, and also the category is selected automatically. So all this will be done automatically when ticket is logged to service task plus. So let's move on to the next section. So now we saw how OpManager generates an alarm, how OpManager identifies faults in your network and triggers an alarm in different ways. And let's see how we can use IT workflow automation to remediate the problems. So here is the flow. When you want to create a notification, when you want to create a workflow, you first need to decide what is the workflow that you need to achieve, and you need to create a workflow for that. And then you need to associate the workflow to the respective devices. And on the third stage, you can either schedule this to run on a periodic time, or you can trigger this upon an event failure. So let me pick first example, get more space on the server for better performance. So this is a typical case where all the database admins face, and whenever there is no space on the server, the server becomes slow. That's a problem. So let's see how we can achieve this using OpManager to automatically save space on the server. So on the workflow section, I've already created a workflow for this. See, it's all going to be drag and drop. So let me first show by clicking on new workflow. So if I wanted to create a workflow to delete a folder, a log folder from a server periodically, all that I will do is check the free space. I can define a threshold for the free space. I can click OK. And then I can just, if I wanted to delete a folder, so based on yes or no, sequentially I can provide the respective location slash logs. So this is how you do this. Let me to save time, I've already created a workflow. So this, what it does, it checks the free space on E drive on my local machine, and it checks for the condition if it is less than 150 GB, and then it deletes a folder called logs that is present under SQL application logs, and again it checks, it repeats the action, and in the E directory, but this time it is trying to delete folders from a different delete a log folder from a different folder. So this is the workflow that I've created to clear the unwanted log files present in my server on the E drive. So trigger, here is where you will select the respective device on which you need to trigger this workflow for, and on the trigger I wanted to run this on a scheduled basis. I don't want to call this upon an event failure, so I'm running this on every Friday at 5 p.m. in the evening, and that is all I need to do. And let me go out and execute this workflow. Got a problem with that. Let me select again. Okay, next, and save it. All right, I think I have a problem with API execution, but this is how you associate the workflow with the respective devices, and when you execute it, it will execute. And let me show, I've already executed this workflow, and let me show the workflow log for you. Yeah, so this is what I did sometime before, and this is how the workflow logs looks like. So when you execute this, it checks for the free space, and the free space is less than 150 GB, so it satisfies the condition. And in the next section, it deletes the folder, and it again checks for the free space. So now it got 109.74 GB, and again it deletes the folder from the directory on a different folder. So this is how the workflow will execute, and you can identify the workflow logs to understand what event failed or what event were successed, and all the logs will be generated on the workflow logs for you. So I have another example here, test SNMP service. Again, I got a workflow for that, test SNMP service. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm testing the SNMP process to understand whether it is running. If it is running, I'm just leaving that blank. If it is not running, I'm trying to start the process with command snmpd start. And again, I'm testing the process to ensure whether it is started or not. If it is started, I'm leaving it blank, and if it is not, I'm trying to generate an alarm. And again, I can trigger this for the devices I want, and I can choose the respective process. Say I want this to be executed when a process SNMP is not running. So I'm selecting the SNMP process here, and when I go next, and I can apply this all the time and save it. I can select the priority, so service down, next, save it. So, and that is how it is done. So what this will do is whenever the process SNMP is down, it will try to restart the SNMP process automatically, and if it is still fails, all these are done without a manual intervention. So when it still fails, it will generate an alarm, so you can get that notified when it doesn't work. And here is a page where we maintain all the workflows that we receive from customers, and all. We also uploaded many workflow templates, so you can access this URL and download the respective workflow that will work for you. And it will be an XML file, and all that you need to do is to, once you download the XML file, you can just go ahead and import that XML file here, providing a name, and that is all. Then you have to follow the procedure to associate that to the respective devices. So next we have tips and tricks, and I'm going to give you some quick tips and tricks. So configuring device dependencies to stop polling a device when its parent device is down. Say you have a switch, and you have a 48 ports connected to that switch, and you are receiving whenever the switch goes down, and you know that the servers connected to that switch will also be down. But if OpManager detects and raises 51 alarms for you, and it's a problem for you, and you need to manually clear that, and you know that it's a problem. And let me show how you can achieve this. Go to quick configuration wizard and device dependencies. So I can select switch. Sorry, I don't have a switch. So if you have to select the respective switch. So let me change the example for router. Okay, so you just go to next, and you can apply this to the respective devices based on category. So all my servers associate. So this will now stop polling the devices whenever the parent device is down. And you can also suppress known alarms for an individual device. So you know that some server is going on a maintenance where you're changing a hardware on the server, and you don't want the OpManager to detect that and generate an alarm. So if you go to the respective device, and you have, I'm sorry, you go to respective device, and at the top you have this icon, and if you scroll down, you have suppress alarm. So if you know that this work will take another 2 hours, then you can just suppress the alarms for 2 hours. So no alarms will be triggered from that particular device for the next 2 hours. And configuring downtime scheduler to stop polling the devices during maintenance window. So whenever you know that the devices are going under maintenance, you can create a downtime scheduler for the respective devices, so that during that period, OpManager will not poll those devices because it is under the maintenance. And you can also configure alarm escalation and notify the super admin when a critical alarm is not cleared within a given amount of time. So you want OpManager to trigger an alarm when a particular event is not cleared within so and so time, then you can create an alarm escalation rule for the server or switch, whatever you prefer, and get that notified to the super admin when it is not cleared within so and so time. And with that, we are coming to the end of this presentation, but we still have, we received a lot of interesting questions that will be discussed by one of our panelists. And you need more help. We have a lot of tech videos available in our YouTube channel, OpManager Tech Videos. I recommend you to subscribe to this channel, and you can take a look at the how-to videos and give us your feedback. And also, all the step-by-step instructions are available in our help.opmanager.com page. You can take a look. And all the technical discussions will happen in our pit stop, forums.manageengine.com/opmanager. And you have any questions, I recommend you to check all these 3 channels so you have answers right here. If you still wanted to write to us, feel free to write to us at the email address displayed on the screen. Also, you can call us at the number displayed for any immediate assistance. And our next training will be on network maps, network management, network reports, and best practices. That will happen on next Wednesday at the same time. And we also have a free ITOM seminar coming up on Los Angeles. And if you would like to join us, you can register for the seminar with the URL displayed on your screen. And don't worry if you don't take a note, we will be sending you the training material and the recorded version of this webinar in email to you. And now is the time for the question and answers. So I'm transferring the session to Mr. Sanjeev, who is one of the panelists answering all your questions right there. And now he will take you through and discuss some of the interesting questions that we received in today's session. So over to you, Sanjeev. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Sanjeev. I'm one of the panelists and product expert for ITOM. So we had some set of interesting questions throughout the session. So let's gonna review this one by one. So first up, we have how do I configure OpManager to send an alert only when the CPU utilization remains at a critical state for an extended period of time. So we do have an option where we can actually specify this, and let me just get you to the actual product to show where it is. So when you go to the inventory, go to any one of the device, or I'm just specifying it for any one specific device now. All you have to do is just go to monitors and then CPU utilization, and then you have the consecutive times here. So this is also what was actually being explained over the session by Suresh. So if let's say if you have a CPU utilization going over 90%, and if you wish to have the alert happening right after 15 minutes or maybe after 20 minutes, you can specify the monitoring interval as 10 minutes and then the consecutive times as 2, so that the alert is going to trigger only after 20 minutes, which is the elapsed time according to your requirement. And the next question is, one of my core routers has been enabled with SNMP traps. However, I don't see that coming along. How to check my incoming traps? So all what we get normally in support is, the reason why the SNMP traps is not working. So there are a couple of ways to actually iterate and identify on whether the SNMP traps are being generated to the OpManager or the ITOM install server. So one way which you can go about is with the network packet sniffer software like the Wireshark, where you can actually simulate an SNMP trap from the source device and then see if it is sending a SNMP packet from the device to the OpManager install server. And another way also what we have is the MIB browser, where we have a separate column called trap viewer to identify and then see what we receive from the respective source. I guess Suresh might have showed you over through the session as well. Next question is, would I be able to modify thresholds from a device template and apply them globally to devices? Yes, there is an option. Let me just get you to the web page now. So when you go to settings and then go to configuration, we have the device template. So this is the page roughly where all of your templates lie. So when you go to modify device template, you have an option called edit threshold, where you actually specify what is the threshold that you wanted, and then click on save and associate. So you can specify whatever set of devices that you wanted. You can just move those devices from left to the right hand side and then click on associate to apply it to the devices, or apply an override to override the existing set of entries that you wanted. Is it enough if we provide just the event ID and source while creating custom event log rules? So apart from the default event log rules that is being categorized in the application, we also have an option where you can create your own customized event log rules based on the failures that are getting triggered in the actual servers. So how do you do it? Go to settings and then monitoring, and then go to event logs and then click on add option. So specify what is the event failure policy that it has along with the event ID or the source. So yes, that option is available. I have set assign the notification profile to few set of devices. However, I do not wish to receive only critical alerts notification for my desktops. So how do I avoid it? So the question is, the end user has already created a notification profile and has associated to a device. All what they wanted is to not send any critical alerts for their desktops. So let me just show you an example. We have an option where you will have to uncheck that. So if you go to inventory, let's say if we have a desktop, and if you go to any specific desktop, and if you already have notification profile being enabled on any one of the device. So let's say if I add any new notification profile, there is a criteria option which you can disable it when you never wanted any critical alerts to happen. So just uncheck the option notify only when severity is under trouble, attention or service down and not critical. Can we export the syslogs on a predefined schedule? So syslogs, as you might know, would be the incoming messages that would be generated as an alarm to the application. So what you can do is you can convert this alarms as a report. So we have a separate report. Let me get you to the reports page. So when you go to reports, you have the Syslog events report. So based on this, you will be able to schedule a report. There is an option where you can schedule this report based on a specific time period and then go ahead with that. Are there any specific criteria options in the notification profile that I can specify other than 1, 3 and 5 polls for device down? Well, I guess this was the first the severity levels that was actually being discussed over the session. Yes, only based on the specific polls 1, 3 and 5 will be able to ascertain for the device down criteria. And as you might know, 1 refers to attention, and then 3 for trouble, and then 5 for your critical alert. So these are the options that you could set for when a device would go down. So you will be setting this under the notification profile edit criteria. Can we specify regex pattern for syslog rules? Yes. Regex is more or less like a match text field, which is going to identify and then pass the exact message from the syslog detailed messages that are being received. So how do you do that? Go to settings and then configuration, and then you will have the go to settings and then monitoring. Okay, so that would be under the monitoring and then syslog rules, and then click on add and then specify the match text here based on your criteria. We do have a help card for this so that you can just specify what is the pattern that you would want it, and then add the specific syslog rule along with the facility or whatever criteria that you wish to specify. I already have an integration of OpManager with Service Desk Plus. I wish to merge asset details of OpManager to SDP. How do I do that? So all you have to do is just go to settings and then add on product settings, and then you have a specific option called merge OpManager asset details with SDP. So once when you select S and then save the changes, the asset details should have a sync from the nodes of OpManager to the Service Desk Plus. And you can also try the sync now option as well. The last question is, can we associate a notification profile during discovery? Yes, we do certainly have an option where you can go about and then configure this. So go to settings and then configuration and then rule engine. So during, even before the part of the discovery, all you'll have to do is go to settings and then configuration and then rule engine and then create a rule where you will have to specify based on the criteria and the action. So let's say if my IP address starts with a specific criteria condition, associate. So next step would be to associate a notification profile based on the existing profiles that I have. So you can specify, add it to the rule engine part, and then go ahead with the discovery process. So these were the set of questions that we have roughly had over these sessions. In case if you have any other further questions or clarifications, you can definitely get in touch with us, as well as the email that has been mentioned. So that would be opmanager-support@manageengine.com. You can also very well give us a call. So this is all about it for the session today. We hope that the session was more informative. You can also provide us your feedback. Thanks again and have a great day.